Banking Law and Practice. Topic: Advances, Securities, and Documentation. Total marks, 100. Part I, Short Answer Questions, 40 marks. Answer all 10 questions in 2 to 3 sentences each, 4 marks each. Q1. Distinguish between loans and advances based on their nature and repayment period. Answer: a loan is a fixed amount sanctioned for a specific term, usually repayable in installments over a longer period. In contrast, an advance is a flexible credit facility, like an overdraft or cash credit, intended for short-term operating needs and repayable on demand or within a year. Q2. Define the safety of funds principle and explain why it is the most important principle of lending for a bank. Answer: the safety principle dictates that a bank must ensure the borrower is able and willing to repay the loan to avoid financial loss. It is the most critical principle because banks lend depositors money, and any failure in recovery compromises the bank's ability to meet its obligations to those depositors. Q3. What is a Pradhanashin woman? Briefly explain the presumption of undue influence in contracts involving such individuals. Answer: a Pradhanashin woman is one who lives in complete seclusion as per her community's customs and has little to no contact with the outside world. Law presumes undue influence in contracts with her, placing the burden of proof on the bank to show that the contract was explained to her and she understood it independently. Q4. Explain the rule in Clayton's case and its relevance when a partner in a firm dies. Answer: this rule states that in a running account, the first item on the debit side is discharged by the first item on the credit side. When a partner dies, the bank must break the account to prevent new deposits from discharging the deceased partner's liability, while new withdrawals create fresh debt for which the deceased's estate is not liable. Q5. Define hypothecation as per the SARFAESI Act, 2002. Answer: hypothecation is a charge created by a borrower on movable property in favor of a secured creditor without delivering possession of the property. It provides the creditor with the right to sell the assets to recover the debt in the event of a default. Q6. What is a negative lien? Comment on its legal standing compared to a standard lien. Answer: a negative lien is a signed undertaking by a borrower stating they will not encumber or sell specific assets without the bank's permission. Unlike a standard lien, which gives the bank possession or a right to sell, a negative lien only provides a personal right of action for breach of contract and does not create a primary charge. Q7. Briefly explain the MAST principle used by banks to examine the quality of a security. Answer: the MAST principle stands for marketability, ascertainability, stability, and transferability of the security. A good security should be easily saleable, have a value that is easy to determine and remains steady over time, and be legally capable of being transferred to the bank. Q8. Define securitization as the process of acquiring non-performing assets, NPAs. Answer: securitization is the process where a specialized company, like an ARC, acquires financial assets, such as NPAs, from banks and financial institutions. These assets are then repackaged into tradable securities and sold to investors to raise funds and clean up the bank's balance sheet. Q9. What is a letter of credit, LC? Distinguish between a documentary LC and a clean LC. Answer: an LC is a bank's written commitment to pay a seller provided they submit specific documents within a set time frame. A documentary LC requires the seller to provide shipping documents, like a bill of lading, to get paid, whereas a clean LC allows payment against a simple draft or demand without needing title documents. Q10. Outline the importance of stamping in the documentation process before or at the time of execution. Answer: stamping is essential because an unstamped or understamped document is generally not admissible as evidence in a court of law. To ensure legal enforceability and protect the bank's interests, documents must be stamped according to the Indian Stamp Act before or at the time of signing. Part 2. Essay type questions, 40 marks. Answer any 5 of the following questions in 200 to 300 words each, 8 marks each. Q1. Principles of sound lending. Discuss the basic principles banks follow while lending, specifically focusing on liquidity, profitability, and diversification, spread. Answer: banks follow several fundamental principles to ensure that credit is extended in a manner that protects the bank's interests while supporting economic activity. Liquidity. This principle ensures that the bank can meet the withdrawal demands of its depositors. Since banks lend out money deposited by the public, they must ensure that a portion of their assets is kept in cash or in a form that can be quickly converted into cash. In lending, this means favoring short-term loans or facilities like cash credit that can be recalled or liquidated relatively quickly. Profitability. As commercial entities, banks must earn sufficient income to pay interest to depositors, cover operational costs, and provide returns to shareholders. The interest rate charged on loans must be higher than the rate paid on deposits. However, banks must balance this with the risk involved. Higher returns often come with higher risks of default. Diversification. Spread to minimize risk. A bank should not put all its eggs in one basket. This involves spreading credit across various sectors: agriculture, industry, retail, different geographic regions, and multiple types of borrowers. By diversifying the portfolio, a bank ensures that a slump in one specific industry or a local economic crisis does not lead to the collapse of its entire lending business. Q2. Classification of MSMEs. Explain the revised criteria for classifying micro, small, and medium enterprises as per the Government of India notification dated 26 June 2020. Answer. The Government of India, via a notification dated 26 June 2020, revised the definition and criteria for the classification of micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs. This new classification removed the distinction between the manufacturing and services sectors, creating a composite criterion based on investment in plant and machinery or equipment, and annual turnover. Micro enterprise, an enterprise where the investment in plant and machinery or equipment does not exceed 1 rupee crore and the annual turnover does not exceed 5 rupees crores. Small enterprise, an enterprise where the investment does not exceed 10 rupees crores and the annual turnover does not exceed 50 rupees crores. Medium enterprise, an enterprise where the investment does not exceed 50 rupees crores and the annual turnover does not exceed 250 rupees crores. All enterprises must register on the Udyam registration portal. The calculation of turnover excludes exports of goods or services, which encourages MSMEs to focus on international markets without losing their MSME status. Q3. Borrowing powers of companies. Describe the legal requirements for a joint stock company to borrow money, including the roles of the Articles of Association and board resolutions. Answer. A joint stock company is a legal entity, but its power to borrow is governed by its constitutional documents and the Companies Act, 2013. Memorandum and Articles of Association, MOA. The MOA defines the company's objects. If borrowing is not mentioned or incidental to these objects, it may be considered ultra vires, beyond the power. The AOA contains the regulations regarding the maximum limit of borrowing and the procedure for exercising these powers. Board resolutions. The power to borrow is generally exercised by the Board of Directors. Under Section 179 of the Companies Act, a formal resolution must be passed at a board meeting to borrow money. Shareholder approval. Section 180. If the proposed borrowing, along with existing debt, exceeds the aggregate of the company's paid-up share capital, free reserves, and securities premium, the board must obtain approval from the shareholders via a special resolution. Registration of charges. When a company borrows against its assets, it must register the charge with the Registrar of Companies, ROC, within 30 days. This provides public notice of the bank's interest in the assets. Q4. Term loan evaluation. Detail the technical and financial parameters a banker considers while funding a project through a term loan, including the debt service coverage ratio, DSCR. Answer. When evaluating a project for a term loan, a banker performs a comprehensive, techno-economic viability, TEV, study to ensure the project can generate enough cash flow to repay the loan over a long period. Technical feasibility. The banker examines the project's location, availability of raw materials, power, water, and labor. They also assess the technology being used and whether the manufacturing process is modern and efficient. Financial parameters. Key financial ratios are analyzed, including the debt-equity ratio, to see the promoter's stake, and the break-even point. Debt service coverage ratio, DSCR. This is the most critical ratio for term loans. It measures the company's ability to pay its current debt obligations using its operating cash flow. It is calculated as net profit plus depreciation plus interest on loan, interest plus principal installment. A DSCR of 1.5 to 2 is generally considered satisfactory by banks. Managerial competence. The banker evaluates the promoter's experience, integrity, and track record in the industry to ensure the project is in capable hands. Q5. Pledge versus hypothecation. Compare and contrast pledge and hypothecation in terms of definition, possession of assets, and the rights of the lender in case of default. Answer. Both are methods of creating a charge over movable assets, but they differ significantly in execution and possession. Definition and possession. In a pledge, the physical possession of the goods is delivered by the borrower, pledger, to the lender, pledgee, as security. In hypothecation, the possession remains with the borrower, only a legal charge is created in favor of the lender. Hypothecation is common for stocks and vehicles. Nature of assets. Pledges are often used for high-value movables like gold ornaments or warehouse receipts. Hypothecation is used for floating assets like raw materials or work in progress, allowing the borrower to continue selling the goods. Rights of the lender. In a pledge, the bank has the right to retain the goods until the debt is paid and can sell them after giving due notice. In hypothecation, since the bank does not have possession, it must first take possession of the assets, seize them, before exercising the right of sale in case of default. Q6. SARFAESI Act powers. Discuss the powers empowered to a secured creditor, Bank FE, under the SARFAESI Act when a borrower or guarantor defaults. Answer. The Securitization and Reconstruction of Financial Assets and Enforcement of Security Interest, SARFAESI Act, 2002, provides significant powers to secured creditors to recover NPAs without the intervention of a court or tribunal. Demand notice. Section 13. 2. Once an account is classified as an NPA, the bank issues a 60-day notice to the borrower and guarantor to discharge their liabilities. Possession of assets. If the borrower fails to comply, the bank can take possession of the secured assets. They can also take over the management of the business or appoint a manager to oversee the assets. Right to sell. The bank has the power to lease, assign, or sell the secured assets to recover the dues. This is typically done through a public auction or private treaty after giving a 30-day public notice. CERSAI registration. To exercise these powers, the bank must have registered the security interest with the Central Registry of Securitization, Asset Reconstruction and Security Interest of India, CERSAI. This prevents the borrower from taking multiple loans against the same property from different banks. Part 3. Case study, 20 marks. Read the following scenario and answer the questions that follow. 4 marks each. Scenario: a partnership firm, Apex Traders, has 3 partners, A, B, and C. The firm enjoys a cash credit facility of 50 rupees lakhs against the hypothecation of stocks. Partner A dies suddenly. At the time of his death, the account shows a debit balance of 42 rupees lakhs. The remaining partners, B and C, want to continue the business and the credit facility. Questions. Q1. Immediate action. What immediate step must the banker take regarding the firm's account upon receiving intimation of partner A's death? Justify your answer with reference to the liability of the deceased partner. Answer. The banker must immediately break or stop the operation of the existing account to freeze the liability of the deceased partner. This is necessary because the estate of the deceased partner is only liable for debts incurred up to the time of death. Allowing the account to continue could discharge the old debt while creating new debt for which the estate is not responsible. Q2. Appropriation of funds. If the banker fails to close the account and continues operations, which legal rule will apply to the subsequent deposits and withdrawals? Explain how this affects the bank's claim. Answer. If the account continues, the rule in Clayton's case applies, where every subsequent deposit is legally treated as a repayment of the oldest debt, the deceased partner's liability. Consequently, the bank's claim against the deceased partner's estate would be gradually wiped out, while new withdrawals would only be the responsibility of the surviving partners. Q3. Reconstitution. If B and C decide to continue the business, describe the process the bank should follow to regularize the credit facility for the reconstituted firm. Answer. To regularize the facility, the bank must open a fresh account for the reconstituted firm and obtain a new formal application signed by the surviving partners. The bank must also execute a fresh set of loan documents and obtain a letter of continuity or a supplemental agreement to ensure the transition from the old firm to the new one is legally sound. Q4. Security nature. Since the facility was against the hypothecation of stocks, explain whether the charge is fixed or floating and describe the process of crystallization. Answer. The charge over the stocks is a floating charge, as it covers assets that change in quantity and value during the normal course of business. This charge undergoes crystallization, becoming a fixed charge, if the firm defaults, goes into liquidation, or if the bank takes steps to enforce the security, thereby preventing the firm from further dealing with those stocks. Q5. Documentation. List 3 essential documents the bank would require from the reconstituted firm to execute the new loan agreement. Answer. The bank would require 3 essential documents: a new partnership deed, excluding the deceased and including any new partners, a fresh set of security documents, such as a new hypothecation agreement, and a mandate resolution signed by all current partners authorizing the operation of the account. Trophy gold medal. Test yourself. Q1. What are the principles of lending? Answer. A banker must follow specific fundamental principles to ensure the safety and recovery of the funds lent, as they primarily deal with depositors' money. Safety. This is the most essential principle. The bank must ensure that the borrower has the capacity and intention to repay. Credit is extended only after evaluating the borrower's character, capacity, and capital. Liquidity. Since deposits are repayable on demand, the bank must ensure that the money lent can be recovered quickly if needed. This is why banks prefer short-term advances over very long-term commitments. Profitability. Banks are commercial organizations that must earn enough interest on loans to pay interest to depositors, cover salaries, and provide a return to shareholders. Purpose. The loan should be for a productive purpose, like business expansion, rather than speculative or illegal activities, as productive loans are more likely to be repaid from the income generated. Diversification. Spread to minimize risk. A bank should not concentrate its lending in one industry or one geographic area. Spreading loans across various sectors ensures that a localized economic downturn doesn't jeopardize the bank's stability. Security. Security acts as a safety net. If the borrower fails to pay, the bank can sell the security to recover its dues. Q2. What are the essentials of valid contract? Answer. According to the Indian Contract Act, 1872, for an agreement to be enforceable by a bank, it must meet several criteria. Offer and acceptance. There must be a clear offer by one party and an unconditional acceptance by the other. Lawful consideration, both parties must exchange something of value. In banking, the bank provides the loan, consideration for the borrower, and the borrower provides interest and repayment, consideration for the bank. Capacity of parties, the parties must be legally competent, they must be of legal age, major, of sound mind, and not disqualified by any law. Free consent, the contract must be entered into without coercion, undue influence, fraud, or misrepresentation. Banks must be particularly careful with Pradhanashin women to ensure their consent is truly free. Lawful object, the purpose of the contract must not be illegal, immoral, or opposed to public policy. Certainty and possibility of performance, the terms must be clear and the act must be capable of being performed. Legal formalities, contracts like mortgages or large loan agreements must be in writing, properly signed, witnessed, and stamped as per the Stamp Act. Q3. Distinguish between lease finance and hire purchase. Answer. Lease finance and hire purchase are both methods of financing assets, but they differ in ownership and accounting treatment. Ownership. In lease finance, the ownership remains with the lessor, bank finance company, throughout the period. The lessee only has the right to use the asset. In hire purchase, the hirer has the option to become the owner after paying the final installment. Depreciation. In a lease, the lessor, owner, claims depreciation for tax purposes. In a hire purchase, the hirer, the one using the asset, usually claims the depreciation. Maintenance. In an operating lease, maintenance is often handled by the lessor, whereas in hire purchase, the hirer is responsible for the upkeep of the asset. Nature of transaction. A lease is essentially a rental agreement for a fixed period. A hire purchase is a sale agreement where the purchase price is paid in installments. Termination. Leasing is often more flexible for the user to return the equipment if it becomes obsolete, whereas hire purchase is geared toward eventual full ownership. Q4. What is packing credit? Answer. Packing credit is a specialized short-term loan facility provided by banks to exporters. It is often referred to as pre-shipment finance. Purpose. It is granted to an exporter to finance the purchase, processing, manufacturing, or packing of goods meant for export. It helps the exporter bridge the gap between receiving an order and actually shipping the goods. Eligibility. To avail of this credit, the exporter must produce a confirmed export order or a letter of credit, LC, opened in their favor by a foreign buyer. Repayment. Once the goods are shipped and the export documents, like the bill of lading, are submitted to the bank, the packing credit is typically liquidated by converting it into post-shipment finance, like bill discounting. Benefits. It provides necessary working capital to small and medium exporters who might not have the funds to fulfill large international orders. Banks often offer this at concessional interest rates as per RBI guidelines to encourage national exports. Q5. Compare buyer's credit and supplier's credit. Answer. Both are methods of financing international trade, but they differ in who arranges the finance and who holds the debt. Supplier's credit. The exporter, supplier, allows the importer to pay for the goods at a future date, deferred payment. Essentially, the supplier is financing the buyer. The supplier may then discount these bills with their own bank to get immediate cash. Buyer's credit. The importer, buyer, arranges a loan directly from a bank or financial institution to pay the exporter immediately. The buyer then owes the bank the principal plus interest. Cost and negotiation. Supplier's credit is often easier to arrange but might have hidden costs in the price of the goods. Buyer's credit allows the importer to negotiate better, cash prices, with the supplier since the supplier gets paid upfront. Complexity. Buyer's credit involves more documentation between the buyer and the lending bank, often requiring a letter of undertaking, LOA, or a guarantee from the buyer's local bank to the overseas lending bank. Q6. Name the various types of institutional customers. Answer. Banks deal with a variety of legal entities, each governed by different laws and requiring specific documentation. Sole proprietorships, businesses owned and managed by a single individual, legally, the owner and the business are the same. Partnership firms, governed by the Indian Partnership Act, 1932. They can be registered or unregistered, and the liability of partners is generally joint and several. Joint stock companies, private or public limited companies governed by the Companies Act, 2013. These are separate legal entities from their owners. Hindu Undivided Family, HUF, a unique Indian legal entity managed by the Karta, eldest male or female member. Trusts, governed by the Indian Trusts Act, 1882, private or public trust acts. They are managed by trustees for the benefit of others. Societies, clubs, and associations, usually non-profit organizations registered under the Societies Registration Act, 1860. Limited liability partnerships, LLP, a hybrid between a company and a partnership, offering limited liability to its partners. Q7. What are the precautions taken by the banker while giving loan to a society? Answer. Societies, whether for social, educational, or charitable purposes, are governed by the Societies Registration Act, 1860, or state-specific acts. When lending to a society, a banker must take the following precautions. Registration status. The banker must verify that the society is properly registered and that its registration is currently valid. A certified copy of the registration certificate should be obtained. Constitutional documents. The bank must examine the memorandum of association and the rules and bylaws of the society. These documents define the society's objects and, crucially, whether it has the power to borrow money and create charges on its assets. Borrowing power and limits. It must be verified if there is a ceiling on the amount the society can borrow. If the loan exceeds this limit, it may be legally unenforceable. Resolution. A formal resolution must be passed by the managing committee of the society, authorizing the borrowing and naming the specific office bearers, like the president or secretary, authorized to sign loan documents and operate the account. Purpose of loan. The banker must ensure the loan is for a purpose consistent with the society's aims as stated in its memorandum. For example, a society formed for education should not be borrowing for speculative commercial trading. Q8. What do you understand by MPBF? Explain recommendations of Tandon Committee report. Answer. Maximum Permissible Bank Finance, MPBF, is a method introduced to regulate bank credit to ensure it is used for genuine working capital needs rather than being diverted. The concept emerged from the Tandon Committee, 1974, which aimed to shift the basis of lending from security-oriented to credit need-oriented. The committee recommended 3 methods for calculating MPBF. First method, the borrower should contribute at least 25% of the working capital gap, current assets minus current liabilities excluding bank borrowings, from long-term funds. The bank provides the remaining 75%. Second method, the borrower must contribute 25% of the total current assets from long-term funds. This is a stricter requirement as it ensures a better current ratio, minimum 1.33:1. Third method, this involves separating current assets into core, current assets, permanent, and real, current assets, fluctuating. The borrower must fund all core current assets plus 25% of the remaining current assets. The report also emphasized the inventory and receivables norms to prevent the hoarding of stocks and ensured that bank credit is only provided to support a reasonable level of inventory and debtors. Q9. How many types of credit facilities are there? Explain all. Answer. Credit facilities are broadly categorized into fund-based and non-fund-based facilities. Fund-based facilities, actual outflow of bank funds. Cash credit, CC, a running account facility primarily against the security of stock and receivables. The borrower can withdraw money up to a drawing power based on the value of current assets. Overdraft, OD, allows a customer to withdraw more than their balance up to a limit. It is usually secured against financial assets like FDs, LIC policies, or shares. Demand loans, a one-time lump sum loan that is repayable on demand or in a short period. Term loans, loans for a fixed period, usually 3-10 years, for purchasing capital assets like machinery or land, repayable in installments. Bill finance includes bills purchased, clean bills, or bills discounted, documentary bills, where the bank pays the seller immediately and collects from the buyer later. Non-fund-based facilities, no immediate cash outflow, but a contingent liability. Bank guarantee, BG, the bank guarantees to pay a third party if the customer fails to perform a contract or pay a debt. Letter of credit, LC, a commitment by the bank to pay the seller, exporter, on behalf of the buyer, importer, upon submission of specified documents. Q10. Distinguish between bank guarantee and letter of credit. Answer. While both are non-fund-based facilities where the bank acts as a guarantor, they serve different primary purposes. Primary purpose, an LC is primarily a payment mechanism used in trade, especially international, to ensure the seller gets paid if they ship the goods. ABG is a risk mitigation tool used to ensure the performance of a contract or the payment of a liability. Payment trigger, in an LC, the bank pays when the seller presents the correct shipping documents. Payment is expected as part of the transaction. In a BG, the bank only pays if the customer defaults on their obligation. Payment is a fallback and not expected. Governing rules, LCs are generally governed by the UCC, Uniform Customs and Practice for Documentary Credits, whereas BGs are governed by the Indian Contract Act and the terms of the specific guarantee deed. Parties involved, an LC involves an applicant, buyer, beneficiary, seller, issuing bank, and often an advising confirming bank. ABG involves the applicant, debtor, beneficiary, creditor, and the guarantor bank. Q11. What are the precautions to be taken by the banker while granting loans to HUF? Answer. A Hindu undivided family, HUF, is a unique legal entity. Dealing with an HUF requires specific caution because of the nature of co-parcenary property. Role of Karta. The loan documents must be signed by the Karta, who is the manager of the family. The bank must verify who the Karta is, usually the eldest member. Legal necessity. For a loan to be binding on the entire HUF and its minor members, it must be taken for legal necessity, or for the benefit of the estate, e.g., family business, marriage, or education of family members. Signature of adult co-parceners. To avoid future disputes where family members claim the Karta acted without authority, banks usually insist that all adult co-partners sign the loan documents as co-borrowers or guarantors. HUF declaration. The bank should obtain a declaration providing the names of all family members, including minors and their dates of birth, to keep the record updated. Succession. Since an HUF is not dissolved by the death of a member, including the Kurta, the bank must ensure the new Kurta is identified immediately upon the death of the previous one. Q12. Explain issuance of electronic cards to overdraft account holders. Answer. To enhance the flexibility of credit, banks now provide electronic cards, similar to debit cards, to customers who have sanctioned overdraft (OD) accounts. Nature of facility. This card allows the borrower to access their sanctioned credit limit through ATMs or point of sale (POS) terminals, rather than visiting the branch or issuing a check. Usage and interest. Interest is only charged on the amount actually withdrawn swiped and for the duration it remains unpaid, which is a major advantage for the borrower's cash flow. Target segment. This is common for individual borrowers, personal OD, small business owners, or against securities like fixed deposits. Compliance. The issuance of such cards must comply with RBI guidelines on electronic banking and credit cards. The card is essentially a digital gateway to a revolving credit line. Validity. The card's validity is usually tied to the renewal period of the OD facility. If the OD limit is not renewed or the account is frozen due to irregularities, the card is automatically deactivated. Q13. Write a note on exposure norms of RBI. Answer. Exposure norms are prudential guidelines issued by the Reserve Bank of India, RBI, to prevent the concentration of credit risk. By limiting a bank's exposure to a single borrower or a group of connected borrowers, the RBI ensures that the failure of one large entity does not lead to the failure of the bank itself. Single borrower exposure. Currently, a bank's exposure to a single counterparty cannot exceed 20% of its Tier I capital. In exceptional cases, the board may allow an additional 5% exposure. Group exposure. For a group of connected counterparties, the limit is generally capped at 25% of the bank's Tier I capital. Capital base. These limits are calculated based on the bank's eligible capital base, which primarily refers to its Tier I capital. Scope. Exposure includes both fund-based limits, loans, advances, and non-fund-based limits, guarantees, LCs, as well as investment in shares or debentures of the entity. NBFCs. There are specific, often tighter, exposure limits for lending to non-banking financial companies, NBFCs, to manage systemic risk within the financial sector. Q14. Briefly describe the statutory restrictions on banks for lending. Answer. The Banking Regulation Act, 1949, imposes certain statutory restrictions on the lending activities of banks to maintain ethical standards and financial stability. Loans against own shares. Section 20 banks are strictly prohibited from granting any loans or advances against the security of their own shares. Loans to directors. Banks cannot grant loans to their own directors or to any firm company in which their directors are interested as partners, directors, or guarantors. Restrictions on unsecured advances. The RBI has the power to fix limits on the total amount of unsecured advances a bank can grant. Selective credit control. Section 21 The RBI can give directions to banks regarding the margins to be maintained and the maximum amount of advances that can be made against specific sensitive commodities, like food grains or oilseeds, to curb inflation and hoarding. Prohibition on trading. Under Section 8, banks are prohibited from engaging in the buying or selling of goods, except in connection with the realization of security given to them. Q15. List out the documents which require witnessing and documents which do not require witnessing. Answer. Witnessing, attestation, is a legal requirement where a person signs a document to verify that the parties to the agreement signed it in their presence. Documents requiring witnessing. Mortgage deeds. Since these involve the transfer of interest in immovable property, they must generally be attested by at least 2 witnesses. Pledge hypothecation agreements. While not always strictly mandatory by law, banks usually require witnessing to prevent the borrower from later denying their signature. Power of attorney. This must be signed in the presence of witnesses or a notary public to be legally valid. Wills and codicils. These strictly require at least 2 witnesses. Documents not requiring witnessing. Demand promissory notes. These are valid with only the signature of the maker. Letters of continuity usually do not require formal attestation. Guarantees. While often witnessed for safety, they are legally valid if signed only by the guarantor. Share transfer forms. These require a signature but not necessarily a formal witness in the same way a deed does. Q16. List out the documents which require registration and documents which don't. Answer. Registration with the Sub-Registrar of Assurances provides public notice of a transaction. Documents requiring compulsory registration. Registered mortgage, standard mortgage. Any document that creates a right or interest in immovable property worth 100 rupees or more must be registered. Sale deeds, for the transfer of ownership of land or buildings. Lease deeds, if the lease of immovable property is for a term exceeding 1 year. Trust deeds, involving immovable property. Documents not requiring registration. Equitable mortgage, created by the mere deposit of title deeds in notified towns. No written registered document is legally required, though a memorandum of entry is usually recorded by the bank. Pledge and hypothecation, these deal with movable property and do not require registration with the sub-registrar, though they require registration with CERSAI or ROC. Promissory notes and bills of exchange. Guarantees. Q17. Which charges on the company's assets are required to be registered with ROC? Answer. Under the Companies Act, 2013, almost all charges created by a company on its assets must be registered with the Registrar of Companies, ROC, within 30 days of creation. This includes a charge for the purpose of securing any issue of debentures, a charge on uncalled share capital of the company, a charge on any immovable property, wherever situated, or any interest therein, a charge on any book debt of the company, a charge, not being a pledge, on any movable property of the company, i.e., hypothecation, a floating charge on the undertaking or any property of the company including stock in trade, a charge on calls made but not paid, a charge on a ship or any share in a ship, a charge on intangible assets like goodwill, patent, license under a patent, trademark, or copyright. Failure to register a charge makes it void against the liquidator and any other creditor of the company in the event of winding up. Q18. What are the different ways in which limitation period can be extended? Answer. The Limitation Act, 1963, sets time limits, usually 3 years for most bank loans, within which a bank must file a suit for recovery. This period can be extended through acknowledgement of debt, Section 18. If the borrower signs a written acknowledgement of the debt before the original limitation period expires, a fresh period of limitation starts from the date of the acknowledgement. Part payment, Section 19. If the borrower makes a payment towards the principal or interest, and this payment is evidenced in writing, like a deposit slip or a letter, a fresh limitation period begins from the date of payment. Fresh documents, obtaining a fresh set of loan documents, like a new promissory note, before the expiry of the previous ones effectively restarts the clock. Legal disability, if the person entitled to sue is a minor or of unsound mind, the period may be extended until the disability ceases. Acknowledgement by performance, in a running account like cash credit, the rule in Clayton's case, and frequent operations help in maintaining the live nature of the debt, though formal balance confirmations are preferred. Q19. What is securitization? Answer. Securitization is a financial process where illiquid assets, like home loans, car loans, or non-performing assets, are pooled together and converted into tradable financial securities. The process, a bank, the originator, sells a portion of its loan portfolio to a special purpose vehicle, SPV, or an asset reconstruction company, ARC. Issuance, the SPV ARC issues security receipts or pass-through certificates to investors, usually institutional investors, backed by the cash flows from the underlying loans. Purpose for banks, it helps banks remove NPAs or long-term loans from their balance sheets, providing them with immediate liquidity to engage in further lending. Legal framework, in India, this is governed by the SARFAESI Act, 2002. It allows banks to recover their dues by selling the financial interest in the assets to ARCs, who then take over the responsibility of recovery from the defaulting borrowers. Risk transfer, through securitization, the credit risk associated with the loans is transferred from the bank to the investors who purchase the securities. Create a sample 100-mark paper as in attached herewith, Lesson 9 Advances, Securities and Documentation, Word file, ch. 9.docs. Part I, Short answer questions, 40 marks, 10 questions, 4 mark each. Part 2, Essay type questions, 40 marks, 5 questions, 8 mark each. Part 3, Case study, 20 marks,